Our conversation tonight is about fixing the Electoral Act. That is a clamor of many Nigerians, those who believe amending the Electoral Act will help right the wrongs in our electoral system. The amendment to the Electoral Act may be faster than envisaged. This is because the Deputy Senate President of Yoma Agege, who is co-sponsoring the bill, says it might be passed by February 2020. The Deputy Senate President, top officials of INEC, representative of the Attorney General of the Federation, and members of civil society were in one room today discussing some of the problems in our elections in a forum put together by the Election Civil Society Situation Room. At the meeting, the Office of the Attorney General made a commitment that it will work with INEC, and INEC equally promised to work with the National Assembly to ensure the early passage of the bill. Meanwhile, the Deputy Senate President told Channels Television exclusively on the sideline of the Electoral Reform Conference that the amendment to the Electoral Act is a major task before the Parliament, and the lawmakers will expedite action on it. Let's discuss this, everyone. So my partner is here in the studio with me. I have Mr. Clement Nwankwo, the convener of Election Situation Room, and I have also Mr. Oluwole Osazi Uzi, is the director of voter education and publicity at INEC. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
So it was somewhat interestingly, one day that I saw INEC agree with the federal government, INEC agreed with the National Assembly, INEC and civil society agreed on a particular matter. Today, everyone in that room agreed that there is a need for electoral reforms. There's a need for us to fix the Amendment Act. The question is, where do we begin from, Mr. Nwankwo?
I think we have to go back to the conversations around the legal framework for elections. We've had elections since the reform started with the Mohammed Lawal Uwais Committee, the Electoral Reform Committee, and we began to see improvements in the electoral process in 2011 in elections presided over by INEC Chairman Professor Tahiru Jega. We did see improved elections in 2011. We did see improved elections in 2015. That brought this administration to office. I think that coming from 2015 to 2019, Nigerians have all agreed that we haven't seen the kind of progress that we need to see with electoral reform. And I think that given the experiences with standalone elections, with the general elections, with the Osun rerun elections just before 2019, and very recently with the Kogi and Bayelsa elections, I think everybody agrees that there have been challenges with Nigeria's electoral legal framework, but also Nigeria's electoral process. And so everyone is agreed that we need to go back to the drawing table. And I'm very delighted that the National Assembly is very much concerned about this, because as we speak, there are proposed amendments. The president did not sign the amendment that was proposed for the 2019 elections because of the excuse given that it was too close to the elections. Now, given that we already have agreed on several issues, the National Assembly already agreed on amendments to be made that was sent to the president just before the elections. I think that given that there are already agreed areas, and given now that we've seen the experience with the general elections and with the most recent governorship elections, everybody is agreed, and that's why we agreed in the room today about several of the issues that need to be reformed and amended.
Mr. Nwankwo, before you go forward, interestingly, we have Mr. Ozazi here. We can equally respond. You raised some very important issue in the room, Mr. Nwankwo, about what happened in Kogi and Bayelsa, which you said INEC should have spoken up about some of these issues, which, of course, if you are looking at the document that will be amended, this one of the issues, or this is some of the issues that INEC need to take up. There's a major. Do you think that there was a drop in our progress, electorally speaking, in Nigeria in those two elections?
Yes, I think that in the 2015 elections, everybody was agreed that INEC was on top of issues. We all supported INEC. We continue to support INEC. But when we look at the circumstances that have arisen since then, and the point we're making in the room today is that INEC needs to take responsibility for challenges with the elections. And we said on April 2nd, 2011, when INEC saw that elections could not proceed because there were several materials that were needed for election to be collated, INEC postponed the elections midway, actually past afternoon, on that voting day.
Noon. on that
Yes,
day.
on that day.
Yeah.
When we saw what was going on in Kogi and Bayelsa, that the violence had overrun the electoral process, we called for INEC to postpone the elections, to in fact cancel the elections, because we believed that the process was no longer in INEC's control. So we believe that INEC needs to be a bit more assertive in taking control of the electoral process.
And possibly call out,
And call
name
out.
names if
Exactly,
need be.
because if political thugs have taken over your elections, if violence has overtaken your elections, if security agents have overtaken your elections, then it is your responsibility as election management body to say to Nigerians, this process is not under our control, we cannot proceed, we have to stop and go back to the drawing table. That was what Professor Tahiri Jega did on April 2nd, 2011. And so when you allow the process to be taken off your hands, whatever results are delivered thereafter cannot be a true reflection of the vote of the people.
Let me come to Mr. Ozaze.
Yes,
A lot of people may not be happy with perhaps what happened in the Kogi and Bayelsa election because of the kind of violence that we saw. A lot of Nigerians would think that we were, as a people, we are above that kind of terrible behaviors where people are still being killed during the elections, violence, ballot snatching, ballot stuffing, things that are terrible during elections still happen. For you at INEC, you said you've made a commitment that you will work with the National Assembly, and you're proposing some areas to be looked at. What do you think perhaps is most important to you? If a lot of people think that there is a drop in the progress that we've made.
well, there's a lot of, in terms of perception of what has transpired over the years. But let me quickly, in answering, you also reference Clem here. And the circumstances of the 2011 postponement are totally different from now. Because in 2011, it was the commission itself that found some shortcomings within its own delivery chain, the logistics delivery chain, and we saw that we could not complete that assignment. So we said, look, it is better to postpone it using our powers under the law, because there was likely to be confusion and breakdown of law and order if we did not, because the elections could not have been concluded. So that's a different thing. Now, in this time we're talking about, there are circumstances such that are not beyond the control of the commission. And yes, there were violence. In Nigerian State constituency a couple of years back, when we saw that the violence was so widespread that a credible process could not have come out of it, we postponed it.
So you didn't think
Midway.
that in Bayelsa and Kogi, the violence was enough to postpone or
the reports
cancel?
we had received from those on ground was not such widespread. I don't want to comment too closely on that, because I understand that this matter is now in the tribunal. So I have to be very careful. Well, we all have to be very careful about what we say. So I'm circumspect about that. So yes, from the reports we got on ground at that time, there were violence. People witnessed some violence. But was it so widespread as to justify cancellation in the whole, in all the polling units of the states? From what we had on ground, no, it was not.
Okay. Mr. Ozaze, I wanted to ask you before we went on that break, why are politicians desperate?
Sure, I'm not too sure I'm the one to answer that
No,
question.
because you are the umpire.
Yes.
So there are politicians on the table, and you are the one who sits in the middle, and you're like an arbiter, in an election. So you should have a feeling why they're always desperate, because your officials are sometimes caught in the middle of all of these their fight.
Correct.
So either killed or maimed or violated in one way or the other. So you should be able to sense why they are desperate.
Well, I could sense that, and I think it's the rewards of public office seem
Too juicy.
very, very juicy. And what a power, influence, money that comes with a public office, I guess, is such that there has to be a desperation. It's almost a do or die. And for those who don't, many of them don't have any other jobs or any other source of income. So if you lose out, I guess for a couple of years you'll be in the cooler. So it's that desperation.
So now, there were a few issues that I'll probably like us to discuss about 3 of them out of these electoral reforms.
Yes.
Thankfully, a situation room brought that opportunity for a lot of people to
Indeed.
come and discuss.
Indeed.
Because the question is, what is the way forward? When President Muhammadu Buhari decided not to accept, he has his reasons for not doing that. Now, let's move forward. Let's put that behind us.
Yes.
The question here, Mr. Uzi, Mr. Festus Okoye said, electronic voting, maybe that's, we might, for INEC, he said, look, we will take our time to look at the issues. Yes. Is electronic voting a good way to go?
Oh, I'll answer it this way. The increased use of technology and the less human interference is always a better way to go. But it's not foolproof. It's not the silver bullet that cures all that ails our system. And looking at the electoral reform bill that is before the House, yes, there is electronic voting. It gives INEC the power to make electronic voting, but it's based on a manual foundation. So, for example, we shouldn't confuse normal electronic voting with online or internet voting. The bill does not provide for that.
But America employs some kind of electronic voting because
Yes, but
there's a machine for it.
Very few countries employ internet voting.
Germany,
or online
France,
voting.
they do less. They don't even do. They don't even
Germany
go there.
does not. Germany does not.
Yeah,
do
they don't do
electronic
voting.
No, it does not.
So why are we thinking about it?
Well, because we have seen that our system has a lot of is sick. Is ill, not too well.
So technology
and that we
can
think
help?
technology can definitely, technology in all facets of our lives, technology has improved, made things more efficient, made things faster, and in some senses, people feel it's more secure.
So they're also talking about empowering the card reader machine and
Yes.
the PVC by law, so that it's not only guided by your guidelines,
Yes.
it's also entrenched in the law, in the
Yes.
Electoral Act.
Indeed.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, well, certainly, because you see the confusion from the Supreme Court judgment. The Supreme Court acknowledged how good a device the smart card reader is, but said it is not in the law. It is an inner guidance, which is subsidiary, which is not as strong as the Electoral Act. When we entrench that in the law, now not just smart card reader, because that point was raised today, and any other technological device for accreditation and for transmission possibly of results and things like that.
So you are thinking of transmitting results electronically,
Well, if the law says so,
or perhaps having a server.
if the law says so, you need a server to store information. INEC has never said.
So you don't have a server now?
INEC never said so. That has never been the case.
So you have
And
a server?
That is a misinterpretation.
Do you have a server
What we
now?
don't have is a server for transmission of results with the SQ numbers and things that we don't have that.
All right, Mr. Nwanko, in all of the conversations today, what popped out to you as perhaps what do you think might carry the magic wand that can help us fix majorly some of the problems?
I think what I saw in the room today from the legislators who were in the room, from stakeholders, INEC, the police, civil society, indeed everyone who was in the room was agreed today that there are lots of loopholes, there are lots of gaps, and everyone seems united in proposing amendments and reform of our electoral system, but also in a very, very timely manner. So I see speed being in the conversation in the room. And I think that everyone also agrees that there is a lot of electoral impunity and that people need to be punished for violations of the electoral law. And I know that the Federal Executive Council did receive the report of the Constitutional Electoral Reform Committee headed by former Senate President Ken Namani. The Federal Executive Council did approve the recommendations of that committee, did ask the Attorney General to send a bill to the National Assembly on Electoral Offences Commission, and quite gratifying to note that in addition to the electoral reform bill that is proposed by Senators Ovia Mwagege and Abubakar Kyari, that they both also are proposing the creation of an Electoral Offences Commission.
What would that do?
I think that you need an independent body away from INEC, away from political influence.
And police?
That is, and police.
Would
but also,
police be using that instrument of law?
what you need is a commission that is there to apprehend election violation offenders, get people who violate the electoral law, arrest them, and charge them to the regular court. My view is that you don't need to create an electoral offences tribunal or court. You need to put, and that's why, again, I am opposed to special courts. I think that you need to strengthen the legal system, get judges to specialize in areas of handling matters, and if there are judges who are specialized in electoral offenses, you channel cases towards them and get them to prosecute in a timely manner election offenders.
We need to go now. We're out of time. Mr. Nwanko, a lot of Nigerians are watching you right now. If you tell them this, and the question is, do you think the government of the day have the political will to make an amendment to our electoral law happen?
I have had conversations with the Attorney General. I've spoken to people in the legislature. I believe that there is a determination to ensure that you see amendments made and in a timely manner. I know that talking to the Federal Attorney General and presiding officers in the National Assembly that they're determined to do so. I know that the President is not running for re-election, and it is important for him to leave a legacy for this country. And I believe that knowing that he's not running for elections, he will pursue the achievement of a proper electoral process before he leaves office.
We hope that this will happen. And I want to wish INEC. INEC is always the baby that gets whatever way it goes. INEC, and sometimes I pity you guys. But I wish you the very best, Mr. Osasiuzi. Thank you so much for coming. And Mr. Clement Nwako, I also wish you the very best because you are in the advocacy business. Thank you so much for coming on, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, if you are wishing and hoping for a greater Nigeria, maybe this is one way you can join your voice in making sure that there is a reform in our electoral process. Well, we've said our own, and that's our bit for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm sure Kimale. Bye for now.